So ZeroLock for Linux works by installing an agent on each one of the endpoints, the Linux endpoints, uh, without having to make any kernel modifications, which means that it's able to run on virtually any version of Linux. Here, some time ago, I installed the agent on a Red Hat Enterprise Linux server, and we can kind of use that as an example for us today. So if we go back to the dashboard and just take a quick overview, we see, it tells us we have one endpoint connected. There was a couple of exploits that it stopped over the last couple of days. The protection availability is, I guess, virtually 100%. There was some period where it wasn't enabled that I was experimenting. I can also go through that as well. So if we look at some recent alerts, we see we have some SSH accesses. Recently, they have their own version of MFA, SSH MFA, but that they've implemented. Some tampering attacks that have been blocked, and then an activity log that records each access to the system and to each of the client as well. Let's take a look at the alerts tab, some of the alerts in more detail. So here we have some tampering attacks that were remediated, some ransomware experiments and attempts that I tried and were blocked successfully. It's possible to get more detail on each of these entries here, and I'd definitely like to do that. But ZeroLock uses behavioral markers to identify these threats. It understands specific types of threats like ransomware and cryptojacking, and is able to monitor for these types of attacks. It focuses on specific threats like, say, ransom EXX or the Log4j attack, and is able to discern legitimate processes writing and deleting files from an actual ransomware attack underway. It copies to memory files being deleted and written to a special place in memory, so that when it does determine that that process is malicious, it's able to stop the attack in real time and then restore the copies that it wrote to memory to their original trusted state. All right, let's take a look at one of these attacks in a little more detail. I'll start by double-clicking on this ransomware attack here. So we see it starts with a list of files that were involved in this attack. Some were created, others were modified. These are the encrypted versions of the files. If we scroll through here, it looks like this particular ransomware attack affected the user's browser files and encrypted all their browser history and browser information. We can also take a look at the processes that were involved in this attack. We have a tree view here and can kind of zoom in a little bit to get more detail. It looks like it started with the user SSHing into the server and then to a bash shell, and then running a series of commands. Looks like it used OpenSSL to encrypt the files and then deleted the original version, and then this series repeated over and over, which I'm sure has a lot to do with how it was able to detect this as an attack, to identify its signature. We can also look at a tree view here. Tree view. Oh, I'm sorry, I meant the list view. We can look at the individual processes and perform actions on each individual process, whether we want to allow it or just outright block it. Maybe we want to block a particular OpenSSL command. We could do that here. We can also go back to alerts and take a look at another attack. Let's check out this tampering attack here. We'll double click on that. Look at the files involved. Looks like this one tried to modify files that were responsible for the machine booting, and we see here they were restored. So first, ZeroLock copied them into memory for this particular process, that was involved here, and then once it determined that the process was indeed malicious, it cut off the process and then restored all these individual files. So if we go to the process list, we can kind of look at more details. Again, it started with an SSH into the server and a bash shell, It looks like it was looking for a particular pattern, trying to find out the processes involved on the system. Looks like this one was involved with Flatpak application, and then ultimately resulting in a sudo and RM attempt. All right, the next thing I'd like to look at is the endpoints. This is a list of all the devices that are currently connected to the system. Here we just have this one, hostname 4, which is a Red Hat Enterprise Linux system, and its status is connected. So we can also just click on this to verify. It does a simple test and confirms that it's currently connected and operating and communicating with the ZeroLock system. So deployment looks like this curl command here. You run this curl command on the remote device. I can copy the installer and then open a shell on that remote system. So this is a shell on the server itself. So if I connect to rel03, I can then run the command here. But I'm not going to because it's already connected. In fact, it very likely might detect that attempt as an intrusion because I don't think that curl is allowed to be run on this system since it's used so much in ransomware and hacking. You'd have to allow that explicitly. Okay, let's actually go through a ransomware attack. Let's see. So I've copied some sample malware to this mal folder here, where we have ransom.exx that I referenced before. Let's take a look. So in here we have a README file and a binary, which is the actual ransomware. So if we look at the README, this runs this command on this directory here and encrypts the files in this folder. So let's copy this here first. We'll make a backup of it so we can play around with the original files. And so if we take a look at the files that are there, we see we have a series of just sample files, basic text files. So now if we look at that README again and actually execute this command, enter the password. Oh. And we've been kicked off the system. It must have determined that this was an actual attack and terminated the connection and hopefully restored the files. So let's go back to the alerts and take a look. And yeah, see here it was 37 files were affected. It detected the ransomware attack and remediated the encrypted files and restored them. So here, these are the files that were involved. Let's see, we created a bunch of these new files. It tried the malware ransomware tried to modify these files and then delete them after the unencrypted versions, and apparently it was stopped successfully. Okay, so if we go over to control policies and take a look at the rules, we have a number of different rules that control access and the actions that are performed upon on the system to block or detect this malware. So we can see, scroll through here, and we have recommended rules that are installed by default. Some other special ones that I've been playing around with. We can also look at policies, and we have two policies, just the default one. I guess it's included with every system, and then a series of recommended lockdown rules. So here we can look through each individual one of these, and a lot of flickering going on here, but I think you kind of get the idea here that we can use regular expressions to block individual files or targets. Take a look at individual source commands that are run. That this rule would apply to. We can protect entire file systems or directories using canary files, which are files that are placed on the system, and then upon those files being modified or encrypted, is a trigger for the system in order to immediately lock down that process. Okay, I think that's a good general overview of the system. We explored many of the options, conducted some ransomware attacks, and I think it did pretty well. I'm looking forward to experimenting with it a bit more. Check us out, linuxsecurity.com. Looking forward to seeing you there.